This case isn't just about sentencing. It's about escalation, fear, and a pattern that prosecutors say never stopped. The state of Ohio versus Troy Adams brings us into a courtroom where past violence, alcohol abuse, and a firearm collide inside a domestic relationship. A victim prepares to speak about a night she says she truly believed she would die, while the defendant faces a possibility of years behind bars. With prior charges, a history of treatment, and a gun involved, the stakes here couldn't be higher. The question the court must answer is simple, but terrifying. Has Troy Adams finally crossed a line that can't be walked back? As the victim begins her statement, the emotional weight in the courtroom becomes impossible to ignore. She doesn't speculate. She speaks with certainty, describing a moment where she believed her life was ending. What stands out here is not just fear for herself, but fear for her children, who were inside the home. Her testimony introduces a chilling reality prosecutors often emphasize in domestic violence cases. When violence escalates, witnesses, especially children, become part of the risk. Ask yourself this. If police hadn't arrived when they did, how different would this case look today? This is where the case shifts from a single incident to an ongoing pattern. The victim outlines repeated behaviors, phone confiscation, physical restraint, isolation, tactics commonly recognized in abusive dynamics. She also acknowledges something deeply personal, returning after manipulation and love bombing. That admission isn't a defense of the defendant. It's a reflection of how complex and psychologically consuming abusive relationships can be. The most unsettling part? She says the violence was getting worse. And this time, it involved a gun. Do you believe escalation like this ever stops on its own?
He's gone through a stint where he had to report a couple times a day with a breathalyzer. Not quite sure what that's called.
Hey, the victim directly challenges a narrative often raised in court, that military service or PTSD explains violent behavior. She doesn't deny trauma. She rejects it as an excuse. Notably, she identifies herself as a veteran and credits her training for saving her life. This is crucial. The court isn't deciding whether Troy Adams experienced trauma. It's deciding whether trauma absolves responsibility. Her words make one thing clear. Treatment was available, resources were used, and despite all of that, the violence continued. So the question becomes, when does explanation end? And accountability.
I'm complaining about this, but my daughter still sleeps with me every night, and I have to check in with her every day because she's always worried about where I am. And that was never the case before. He's never apologizes. And even last time we were in court, he violated the no contact order. You know, I'm sitting there and he's standing in front of me and professing his love. And he's not supposed to talk to me. And so that's what scares me. And the longer he's in prison, the longer I feel safe. And I think that's it.
Judge, in addition...
The prosecutor's argument is methodical and devastating. This isn't a first offense. It isn't even a second. Prior alcohol-related convictions, similar felony charges in another state, and repeated treatment attempts form the backbone of the state's position. Most striking is the prosecutor's focus on blame, how the defendant repeatedly shifts responsibility, even accusing the victim of causing his intoxication. The legal takeaway here is important. Voluntary intoxication does not excuse criminal conduct. When a defendant continues the same behavior for years, courts are far less inclined to show leniency. Would you trust rehabilitation after this history?
We don't know the disposition to, or they've been dismissed. And then, in addition, Your Honor, in 2018, as was alluded to by the victim, he was charged with felony domestic battery, felony strangulation, interference with the reporting of a crime, and resisting law enforcement in Delaware Circuit Court in Indiana, which is the exact same charges we have here. He went through Veterans Court there and received all the treatment you heard the victim tell you about. And then here we are, where he does the exact same thing again. And I don't think that someone who has so clearly been engaged in criminal activity related to alcohol use in the past should be able to come into court and say, you know what, don't punish me as much because that was when I was drunk, and that really isn't me. I don't think that's a viable excuse. In addition, Judge, I will tell you, I listened for a long time to Mr. Adams' jail calls, and his home wave calls with his daughter and other people. And he has consistently maintained that it's not his fault that he was drinking. He claimed over and over and over again that the victim gave him drinks in cans that look like flavored water that he drinks. And somehow he had no idea he was drinking alcohol. And all of a sudden, he blacks out and doesn't know what happened. So he has been blaming the victim the entire time. Now, he won't say that to you, and he won't say that in the PSI, but that's what he said consistently for quite a while. And he's shaking his head to me, yes, right now. So apparently he still believes that. Judge, I think that this is extremely troubling behavior. He held the victim at gunpoint. He strangled her to where she couldn't breathe, which is exactly what the strangling part he's done before. And I think this is just a series of escalations that ultimately will lead to him causing serious injury or killing someone he's in a relationship with. I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to stop this behavior. That being the case, the state would ask the court to impose a very substantial prison sentence. In this case, Judge, he's facing, he was convicted of abduction with a 3-year firearm specification, and strangulation with a 3-year firearm specification, and obstructing official business are 3 felonies, and then misdemeanor domestic violence. Because these felonies are not the type that would require the application of 2914B1G, the 2 firearm specifications would merge. So really, he only faces the imposition of 1 3-year firearm specification. The minimum sentence he faces is 3.5 years. So 6 months on one of the felonies and then 3 years on the firearm specification. But I don't think 3.5 years, Judge, in these circumstances is nearly sufficient.
The defense paints a contrasting image: a veteran, a worker, a man struggling with addiction rather than intent. Notice how responsibility subtly shifts again. When he's sober, he's not a bad guy. But courts don't sentence potential. They sentence actions. The law doesn't separate a person into sober and drunk versions. What matters is what happened, who was harmed, and whether the public is safe. The defense asks the court to see this as an alcohol problem. The prosecution sees it as a pattern of violent crime. Which argument do you find more convincing?
In court, but
I think I recall.
Troy has a drinking problem because that doesn't go away. The criminal record would indicate, as well as everything the court has heard, when he's drinking, he's a bad guy. When he's not drinking, he's not a bad guy. On this particular day, Mr. Adams did not purchase or obtain these. He was drinking. He didn't purchase or obtain those for himself. Just a brief mention of the 2018 case that was dismissed out of Indiana. If somebody has a presumption of innocence while a case is pending, then certainly they should have a presumption of innocence when that.
This is one of the most emotionally complex moments of the case. The defendant speaks at length, expressing shame, love, forgiveness, and spiritual transformation, but repeatedly claims he doesn't remember the violence. He offers financial gestures and emotional appeals, even addressing the victim directly despite prior no-contact violations. For many viewers, this raises difficult questions. Is this remorse, manipulation, or both? Courts often look not just at words, but consistency and whether responsibility is fully accepted. Does saying "that wasn't me" bring closure, or does it avoid accountability?
I don't want her to pay me the $45,000 that she owes me. I'm just going to go ahead and take care of it myself. And I put paid in full and I signed it. So she doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And she can just forget about paying me back on that. Because it was never about money for me and her. It was just about, I wanted to be her husband and be a family and not just be together. I wanted to complete the family, but she never would. It was just hard. As I think about the day that we're reading off my charges, I was mortified because I don't remember anything. The last thing I remember is trying to get to you and Alexia on the 18th hole. I saw you two walking on the 18th hole where they were giving stuff away in the pizza thing. I was getting dizzy and I thought I was getting ready to have a seizure like I did at Dad's funeral. And before I could get to you, everything went black, and that's the last thing I remember. The next thing I remember is waking up in the front of the house and I felt like my back was broke. I was completely ashamed of myself, and I am still at a loss for words. It was like I was listening to someone else's charges. I was beside myself. I would never intentionally harm you or the children or anyone for that matter. I have known and felt brutality at the hands of others. I truly don't remember what happened, and that scares me. That was not me that night. It was the evil inside. I couldn't control me from all the trauma that I have suffered over the years. I have issues from being attacked, tied up, and sexually assaulted in the military that I recently told you about, and started to have flashbacks that past week that we talked about. So starting right now, Andrew, I'm asking you to find it in your heart to forgive me. You've never forgiven anybody for anything, and you're walking around with so much hate inside of you. I wish you would learn to forgive people, just even for the smallest things. Carrying around all that hate inside of you is killing you. I'm truly sorry you had to endure what you did. I wish we could talk because, you know, it's important how important your feelings and desires are to me. But if this is all the closure we get, I pray you don't burn with hate towards me. I'm so sorry. I love you more than I've ever loved anybody in my life. You know you're my soulmate. I have these for you and the kids. These are poems that I have written. I haven't wrote a poem since I first went in the military. That God promised that He would heal my brain. I've talked to Him through a prophet. I've turned my life over to Jesus as my Savior, and He started to heal my brain, and I'm doing a lot better. I'm so sorry. I just miss you and the kids. I feel like I'm dying every day.
I think that's all.
Okay, thank you. I've considered the statements that have been made here today. Pre-sentence investigation report. I've considered the purposes and principles of sentencing set forth in the revised code, which are to protect the public from future crime by the offender and others, and to punish using the minimum sanctions that the court determines accomplish those purposes without imposing an unnecessary burden on state or local government resources. The court finds the defendant is not amenable to community control, and a prison is necessary to fulfill the purposes and principles of sentencing, including punishment, deterrence, and protection of the public. Probation would not adequately punish the defendant and would seriously demean what happened in this case. Therefore, the sentence is 18 months on count 1, the felony 3, 3 years on the firearm specification. On count 2, the strangulation is 18 months to run concurrent. There's a merger of the firearm specification. The domestic violence, 6 months. The obstructing official business, 12 months. Both of those are to run concurrent for a total of 54 months. This carries post-release control, which is supervision by the adult parole authority. It's mandatory for a period of up to 3 years, but not less than 1 year. If you violate the rules of post-release control, the adult parole authority could send you back to prison for 9 months per violation, up to a total of 27 months additional. If you are convicted of a new felony during that period of supervision, the court that has the new felony case can revoke post-release control, impose whatever time remains on supervision. If you have less than a year remaining on supervision, they can add a year to the sentence in the new felony case. Mr. Adams, you have a right to appeal this sentence. You have 30 days from today to file a notice of appeal. If you cannot afford an attorney will be appointed to represent you. Any document you need to be provided at no cost. Do you have any questions, sir? All right, that's all.
In the end, the judge delivers a clear ruling. Troy Adams is sentenced to a total of 54 months in prison, including a mandatory 3-year firearm specification, followed by post-release supervision. The court finds he is not amenable to community control, emphasizing protection of the public and the seriousness of the offense. This case highlights a critical legal reality. Repeated violence, especially involving a firearm, dramatically limits judicial leniency. If you found this case as intense and troubling as we did, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more in-depth courtroom breakdowns that cut through emotion and focus on the facts.